in July 2020. As a UNESCO Category 2 center, IEPA is, among other things, to build capacity of the workforce in the educational sector in the West Africa sub-region, in the areas of educational planning, leadership, and administration, as well as mobilize international and regional experts to provide technical assistance and policy advice to support sector-wide planning and policy deployment. So this webinar series is one of such events to build capacity geared toward SDG 4. And I entreat all of you to visit our website and read more about IEPA. So as our mandate is for the whole of West Africa, today we have in our midst a giant in the West African sub-region when it comes to educational planning and administration to take us through presentation today. So our main presenter for the day is Mr. Koffi Segniagbeto. He is the head of the International Institute for Educational Planning, IIEPA office in Dakar, where he has been coordinating the various teams and activities. He's also responsible for the technical partnerships, seeking additional funding, and leading a high-level dialogue on the orientations of education and training policies in conjunction with IIEP's decision-making bodies. Since taking office in September 2020, Mr. Segniagbeto was the Senior Education Policy Analyst at IIEP Dakar, where he provided technical support to countries on various aspects of sector analysis and educational planning. In recent years, he has, among other things, led a team that supported several African countries in the analysis and planning of their educational systems. And some of these countries are Chad, Mauritania, Niger, Namibia, among others. Besides supporting the sector planning process in general, Mr. Segniagbeto brings expertise in specific areas such as teacher management, vulnerability analysis, capacity deployment, among others. So that's our main presenter for today. Mr. Koffi, if I can call you that, we are ready for you and your audience awaits your presentation. Thank you. Mr. Segniagbeto, are you online?
Yeah, I am. Some technical issue, but here I am.
It looks like today we've been having technical issues across the net, the whole of West Africa. I'm happy you're online, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And thank you, IFA, for such, a lovely presentation. I'm not expecting that much from my humble personality. So I'm very, very happy to be your host today to have this conversation. I call it a conversation with, distinguished personality at IEPA and all over West Africa and beyond to discuss or to talk about a topic that is very, very, dear to my heart and to my professional goal and objectives. So I'll be talking today about efficiency of education systems. I'll be talking about, teacher management, an issue that at IIEP is very dear to our program. So do you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen now. So you're good to go.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll be talking about teacher deployment and allocation across Africa. And this is something, this is part of, a very long experience IIEP in general and IIEP in Dakar, we are having for the past, I can say personally, for the past 20 years, when we support African countries in conducting what we call education sector analysis. So before going into detail about the topic we will be doing, let me talk a little bit about IIEP and what we are doing. As you know, IIEP is a global institute, category 1 UNESCO institute with 3 campuses in the world. The headquarters is in Paris, and we have, of course, an office in Paris, but also 2 other offices. We call them regional offices in Buenos Aires, in Argentina, and then 1 in Dakar. And as Efwa introduced a few minutes earlier, I'm coordinating the work of the team here in Dakar. We are about 35 people, and by mid next year, we'll be around 40 people. Our mandate in general is to develop capacity of countries to plan and manage their education systems. So we do many things in this regard. We do something we call technical cooperation, and we develop capacity, of course, through training. And more important is we develop tools, guidelines to help senior staff at the ministry level, but also development partners. We provide them with tools that they can use to better manage and plan their education system. The IIEP has been established in 1963, but our office in Dakar has been established in 2001. And for those years, we've been working in helping countries to plan their education system, but now we are moving toward management support. That means we will help countries to manage their education system. So the topic we have today is right in line with our effort to support countries in managing their education systems. So to do so, we develop, or we are seeking partnership within UNESCO, of course, and outside UNESCO. And within UNESCO, IEPA is a key partner. You are based in West Africa, in Ghana, where we are based in Dakar. So I think we can develop close collaboration in order to better support our countries in our competitive advantage. And last, Africa, in our 11 medium-term strategy, Africa is now a priority for IIEP and for UNESCO, of course. In our strategy, IIEP is committed for the next 4 to 5 years to devote about 50% of our portfolio, of our effort on African continent. So Africa is a priority, and management of education systems in Africa is a priority for our institute. So that's it. Just to give you outlines of the presentation today, I'll try to demonstrate why teachers and teachers management matter for IIEP and for the community of planners and managers in general. And then I'll talk about teacher management, and I'll try to show what really is the issue about teacher management. In a third position, I'll talk about practices across Africa, how African countries, what do they do exactly? I'll try to take advantage of the result of the result of our support provided for the last 20 years to African countries. In a fourth position, I will talk about what IIEP can do, IIEP and partners like IEPA, what they can do to support African countries in this regard. And finally, I will welcome your advice, your comment, your questions, and I'll be more than happy to provide you with some reflection or thoughts if I can. So why, you know, in order to respond to the first question is why teachers and teachers management matter. In order to respond to this, I would like, first of all, to tell how education is important at not only at individual level, but also at the government level. You know, in Africa or even beyond Africa, governments all over the world dedicate a very high share of spending to education. So the graph or the figure you are seeing here is about the share of government spending on education compared to the total government recurrent spending. When we talk about recurrent spending, is what government spending on wages, salaries, and also, you know, utilities, like, you know, when they support training activities and the functioning of the administration in general. So when we consider all the country you see here is a sample of countries we have supported for the past 10 years, I can say. And we analyze how much the government is spending on education, on recurrent education, the recurrent spending. Here we exclude the capital investment on education because it's very random. It cannot really predict it depending on the situation of the government, on the context of the government. But the recurrent spending is almost compulsory because at the end of the day, the government has to pay salaries. The government has to ensure the activities are running. So we compare education spending and the total government spending. And what we have seen is about a quarter of the recurrent spending on education, a quarter of the government spending is dedicated to education. That's very important because, you know, government has many other responsibilities like security, health, you know, yeah, the safety at home. They have social issues to take care of. They have defense spending, especially if you consider our Sahel countries at the moment who are facing with huge security problems. So the government has many other responsibilities to take care of. But when it comes to education, about $1 in $4, if I can express myself like this, is dedicated to education. And you can see that in some countries like Niger or Senegal, about 40% of their spending is dedicated to education. That shows how important is education to governments all across Africa. Now that we know that education is really important when it comes to spending, let's look at how teachers' wage bill compare in total education spending. What we see is teachers' wage bill is really important in education spending. For example, for primary cycle, all over Africa, we have like 75% of education, of spending on education is dedicated to teacher salary. That's really important. And in lower secondary is 2/3, and it's about the same in upper secondary. So when it comes to education, teachers are the most valuable inputs, not only for student learning. You can see that if you look at SACMEC, you know, the large survey we call SACMEC, that is run in Eastern and Southern Africa. And we can see that in West Africa, we have a program we call PASEC, that is about, you know, international evaluation of student achievement. And those studies from their report, they indicate that teachers are the most valuable input for education. And when we also see that teachers' wage bill is the highest item in education expenditure, we can see that, you know, when it comes to teachers, we need to take a very close look on how much money is being spent on them and how this money can be improved in order to achieve better learning outcomes. Teachers matter the most, not only, sorry for that. Teachers matter the most because teachers will be represent between half, like we can see in a sample of in Africa. In South Sudan, for example, you have 50%, more than 50% of teachers' wage bill compared to recurrent spending. When you have in Togo or in Tunisia, for example, almost 100% of recurrent spending is on teachers' wage bill. So for us as planners and managers, if we want to improve overall efficiency of education system, we need to do something about spending on teachers. So that's what we can see here in this graph. On this graph, it's obvious that, you know, we need to do something about teachers and how teachers are managed. Okay, here we look at, you know, teachers management. This is an issue in many countries. Here we try to figure out how many teachers are available for students, and we compare the total teacher staff to the enrollment in public school in many countries. You can see that depending on the means, because here the lower is the PTR, you can see the richer, or, you know, the richer is the country. For example, in Seychelles, we have 16 students for one teacher. Here, if you see it, at the lower level in Seychelles, we have about 16 students for one teacher. And for Central African Republic, for example, we have more than 80 students for one teacher. That's a huge, that's a lot for one teacher, you'll say. But in average, we have about, in Africa, we have about 40 students for one teacher. So depending to their means, you know, each country has to face a different situation or to face with a different standard. I'll show later on what is the standard for students monitoring, or for student monitoring when it comes to PTR or people-teacher ratio. This is the actual situation in countries. This is not the standard, the official standard for country. This is just the figure that the country has to face when it comes to people-teacher ratio in public schools. And here we have for within a country, that here we are talking about management within a country in real term. And here we took the example for Sierra Leone, where we conducted a very deep analysis in 2019 in order to help the country develop a new education sector plan, a new education sector policy. And when we look at the overall situation in Sierra Leone, the pupil-teacher ratio is 41. That means, there is 41 students in the classroom facing one teacher. But when we look at the different districts within Sierra Leone, we see that, for example, in Bonte Municipal, a district they call Bonte Municipal, there is 28 students in average for one teacher. And at the same time, in a district they call Kwadiu New Sembohom City, they have 50 in average. So how can we as planners and managers, how can we afford that in the very same country, we have 28 students for one teacher in a district, and in another district, we are having 50 students for one teacher. That means we as planners and managers, we are not really doing what we need to do, because every single Sierra Leonean, for example, deserves an equal treatment when it comes to people monitoring teacher service delivery. So at national level, the average, what we see, the average at national level hides important geographical disparities, and that is what you can see there. And Sierra Leone is just an example I gave. I can show you many other countries where the situation is not quite different from what we are seeing here in Sierra Leone. I'll show you more examples in the next slide. So we have two figures here, one in Namibia that we supported at the left, and then at the right, you have the example for Mauritania that also we had. So for Namibia, for example, you can see that the situation, the national average for PTR, for people-teacher ratio, is 27, but the lowest PTR is in Zambezi region, that is 21, and the highest PTR is 35 in Erongo district. You can see that compared to the average, teacher management is more or less under control in Namibia. But of course, that can be improved, because when you have 21 in Zambezi region and 35 in Erongo region, the gap is still a bit important, and we need to do something about it. But when you compare Namibia to, for example, Mauritania here, Mauritania, where the PTR across schools, here in H-axis, the vertical axis, you have number of schools. For example, here you can see that there are about 40 schools who have a PTR of 10. That means in those schools, one teacher is facing with only 10 students. When at the same time, you have, you can see about the same number of schools where the PTR is 100 and even higher than 100. So this is very, very huge. You can see that the range for PTR across schools is very, very huge in Mauritania. That raises some management issues and some management questions, especially for us as education managers, education planners, as institutes whose mandate is here to support countries in planning and managing their education system, but especially to also helping them reach the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030. So if we let those issues, those management issues continue within the countries, we are not in the right direction to support those countries. In Mauritania, for example, you have about 2/3 of schools where the PTR is lower than 40, and then you have 15% of schools where the exact indicator, the same indicator, is over 40. So that can continue anymore if we as institute, we are here to support the countries. And yeah, to continue on the same vein, here we indicate the case of Sierra Leone again, and where here each dot you see on the graph is a school. Each dot is a school. So, for example, I show here the two examples. If you consider schools with about 600 students, schools who have 600 enrollment, you know, the number of teachers range from about from 1, like you see here, up to 24, as you see in the red dots over there. That's a huge, and we are in the same country, and we are within the same Ministry of Education. We have the same Department of Planning. We have the same Department of Human Resource Management. So how could we let this happen, that in a country we are giving one teacher to a school, and we are giving 24 teachers to another school with the same enrollment? That's a huge question for us as a planner. And another example is if we take all the schools who have 10 teachers, for example, this is just an example. In Sierra Leone, the number of students, the enrollment for those schools, they range from around 200 up to 750. So this is a huge variation, or a huge gap within the same country. So this is something when we support countries doing the education sector analysis or education sector policies, we help countries analyze, identify, discuss the gap, the causes, you know, what could be at the origin, what can explain such a huge gap in teachers' management. So to do this, we came up with a very simple indicator that we call R square. And in the case of Sierra Leone, for example, the R square is 42%. That means only 42% of situations where the number of teachers assigned to a school is in line with the enrollment of that school. So in other words, that means in 48% of the situation, the number of staff is not in line with the enrollment. So what we call the degree of randomness is 58%, and that is huge. In principle, we as planners, we as managers at the ministry level, we have to make sure that this degree of randomness is minimized, is reduced, and usually we assume that having a degree of randomness around 15 or 10% is is appropriate, because we cannot reach 0% of randomness, because we know that we are dealing with a social issue. We know that we are dealing about human resources, and we cannot, and individual teachers and students, they are not really object that can be perfectly aligned. So that is what I didn't say, that is for primary schools. And when we come to secondary school, junior or senior secondary schools, we also look at, not only the teachers' management, the distribution and allocation within school, but we also look at, their weekly loads, because you know that at junior or secondary schools, the way we deploy teachers or we use them is different from what we used to see at primary level. Teachers have specific subjects that they teach, and they have specific number of hours. So here in Sierra Leone, again, we look at, whether teachers are being serviced or are using their full-time service in school. And what we observe is around 70% of full-time GSS and senior secondary teachers do not meet the prescribed minimum of 33 teaching period per week. You can see here 29% of senior school teachers are having like less than 10 period weekly. That's a huge gap in teacher utilization. And when we combine, 29% and 43%, we have around 70%. This is 72 actually, but we have around 70% of teachers who are not really meeting the prescribed minimum of teaching loads. So according to this survey, the secondary general learning assessment survey that was conducted in 2018 in Sierra Leone, an average teacher at the GSS or an average student, junior or senior secondary, is taught less than half a standard school day. We have teachers there in place, and then they are not doing the job. They are not giving the weekly load that they are supposed to do, to give to students. That's also another issue of management of teachers we observe in countries. So that means that we have here room for improvement in the management of teachers, in terms of making them more accountable for the time they actually teach to students. I was talking about degree of randomness here in this graph. We just show, how important is the degree of randomness of teachers allocation in primary cycle all across Africa, and we can see that that's a huge issue, because the degree of randomness is as low as less than 10% in Cape Verde, Sao Tome and Principe, and Zimbabwe. But at the same time, it's very, very important. That means there are huge mismanagement in countries like Benin, South Sudan, Cote d'Ivoire, DRC, Mali, as you can see here at the right side of the graph. So in general, we estimate that we did suggest that 1 in 3 teachers are misplaced in schools. You see that in average in Africa, 31% of randomness of teachers. That means, about 1 teacher in 3 teachers are misplaced in schools. So they are in a place, in a schools, they are affected, they are deployed in a classroom in a position where they are not supposed to be. Yet teachers' misplacement leads to unnecessary increase in teachers' needs. You know, I'll talk later about it, but whenever teachers are misplaced, that increase the need for teachers. So that in some situation, in overall, you can realize that there is no need to hire new teachers in this country, but principals, districts, district supervisors, or all other supervisors are requesting for more teachers because they are feeling the needs at the ground. The teachers are not there. There are other districts that are overstaffed, when at the same time we have other districts that are understaffed. So that creates an unnecessary increase in teachers' needs. So in facing with this situation, what we did as IIEP. So a few years ago, we conducted workshops or knowledge sharing about teachers management issue all across Africa, and we conducted a workshop here in Dakar for West African countries, and we did the same for Eastern and Southern Africa countries in Kenya. And what we observe from practitioners, from planners, from partners all across Africa is we are facing with, like I said, we have many issues, but here I highlighted two of them. We are facing with divergence between needs assessment and recruitment processes. On the one hand, most of the time the needs of teachers is identified at the school level, because principals are the one who feel the most the need for teachers. And on the other hand, we have recruitment processes that are conducted at the central government level. So between the local level, who are really in charge of identifying the needs, and the central level where the recruitment process takes place. So there is a diversion. That means the two processes are not really in line. So in nearly 9 out of 10 countries, we see that government paid teachers recruitment is the responsibility of the central government. Some exception are Nigeria or Comoros, where you have states or federal states system where the need is done at state level. So that means the decentralization of needs identification or teacher recruitment are not really effective today in many countries. We know that many countries are in a process of decentralizing the education system in general, but today what we are seeing is that this is not really effective. What we also see about about our discussion with countries is, there is some rules and regulation around teachers management, teacher deployment, teacher mobility from classroom to district or administration level. But those rules, those regulations on teachers management are really fragile. The decisions are not really effective, and they can be overthrown by other decisions, God knows, from or how they are really taken. So, for example, teacher mobility is regulated in most countries, and almost all countries have standards for class size, for a number of teachers that need to be deployed in many schools. But posting decisions from posting meetings are fragile. Those decisions are vulnerable. So this is just an example. The table at the right side is an example of this kind of mismanagement. So we asked countries during the previous school year, where any allocation decision were made, where any allocation decision made other than those taken by Teacher Allocation Commission. That means, you have a commission that took place and made decision about deployment, mobility, and all those things. But beyond this decision from the commission, there are taken all over the school year that is not really in line of the commission decision. So countries like Central African Republic, DRC, Lesotho, Madagascar, they say yes, this kind of decision is taken beyond the commission decision. This is just an example I gave. I can show you the same example for all the countries we have surveyed. So one key lesson we also observe from our discussion with countries is that there is a lack of post-based teacher recruitment policy in many countries. What does that mean in reality? That means teachers are recruited, but they are not recruited in a very specific teachers, and they can be affected or deployed whenever it means, but there is no specific position within a school where they are posted to. So, for example, in 9 out of 11 countries in West Africa, this is something we observe. And in 7 out of 12 countries in Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa, we did observe the same thing. And another thing is also that there is a lack of digital tool to help make the posting decision. So planners and managers, they are doing the best they can in the process, but the lack of tools, the lack of appropriate decision about posting, about deployment and mobility. Apart of some specific countries, like in Rwanda, where we observe that they have teacher management information system. That is also the case of Senegal, where they told us that they have a platform, a digital platform they call Mirador. That is a system that helps them deploy teachers, manage their mobility, and even manage their we do not see that much this kind of tool in many countries in Africa. We asked the same question to our colleague in Ghana back in 2016 or 2017. They told us about a mathematical formula that they use, but they did not really confirm. So I'll be asking our IEPA colleagues to intervene and to comment on whether they know about a system in Ghana that can help planners and managers to improve the management of teachers. So here, I was talking earlier about teacher utilization, and this is just the example we see or we saw from the survey we did for many countries in West Africa. What I try to see here is that there is a weekly load for students, and there is a weekly load for teachers. We try to see whether the weekly load for a student, for example, how it fits compared to the weekly load for teachers. And what we see, and I gave here an example of upper secondary school. We see that in Liberia, it will take less than a teacher to meet the needs of a class of students. For example, in Liberia, you have students having 22.5 hours in average each week. For teachers, teacher has to deliver 25 hours of teaching services. So you see that in Liberia, you can have one teacher for one class of students. But in Benin, for example, you have in secondary schools, you have student needs 36 hours or 36 periods of teaching each week. And at the same time, every single secondary school teacher has to deliver 18 hours. So that means when you have this kind of standard within your system, you'll need more teachers to meet the demand of teaching from students. So what I try to show here is, depending on the standard in place within the system, the standard you put in place will impact the management you can have, vision you can have for your teachers. So I'll finally talk a little bit about, what IIEP and its partners can do to help countries in improving the situation of teacher management. You remember at the early beginning, I talked about, our moving towards support to implementation in our 11 medium. So this is something IIEP is aware of, and we hope in this regard we'll have support and collaboration from IEPA in supporting countries to build or to develop their capacity to implementation, so that we can support them, for example, in human resource management. And actually, with support from UNESCO office here in Dakar, we are about to support Mauritania, Chad, and Burkina in improving their human resource management. We are helping them reviewing their norms and standards when it comes to human resource management. You recall what I showed earlier about the standards in countries. Sometimes those standards are not really in line with what can be expected when we want to improve the teacher management issues. And we are also helping those countries to develop a manual of procedures on management that will consist of reviewing all those norms and standards, and then helping them develop the guidelines and build their capacity for the use of those guidelines. And also will help those countries develop digital tools, as we showed you earlier about Rwanda, about Senegal, and we'll develop more and more tools to help countries to manage their education system. And of course, as training is our core mandate here at IIEP, we will help countries, we train their senior staff to better manage their human resources. So this is the conversation, this is the topic of the conversation I'm here today to share with you. I'll be more than happy to receive your comments and to receive your question. And if you like, you can send me email if you need more information about the data I share, about the experience we have in many countries. And if you are working, if by chance you are working in a specific country in Africa on this specific topic, please reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to collaborate or to do whatever I can. Thank you very much, colleague. This is the story. Once again, I am here to share, so your comments are welcome. Over to you.
Well done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koffi, for that brilliant presentation and to show us that a text takes across Africa on how pupil-teacher ratios are distributed, what is being done to reduce the degree of randomness, how we are tackling teacher postings and misplaced teachers, so that at the end of the day, we can all achieve equitable and lifelong education for all. That is the mandate of UNESCO Category 2 that we are all working towards. Thank you very much. Well, now the floor is open for question and answers. And I know that I have my senior colleagues and colleagues from IEPA also online. You did ask a question about the mathematical formula for teacher deployment in Ghana, which you haven't had response to. So maybe in the course of the discussions, the IEPA team can give a comment or two on that. So dear participants, the platform is now open for questions. So if you have any questions, if you have any contribution, you can either type it or you can raise your hand and we'll call you to contribute that. Okay, so I have one hand raised. Sefam Adobo.
Adoboy.
Adoboy, thank you for
Yes,
the correction. Andy, please ask your question. Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am, for the opportunity. And thank you, sir, for this wonderful presentation.
Hello.
However, the head teachers are the ones to determine whether their school is in need for more teachers or not. What should be the way forward? Because if that happens and then it requires a teacher needs, meaning that some schools will be getting more teachers and others will be lacking. Should we allow the central government to detect or indicate that you need this certain number of teachers into your school per the population of your students? Or everything should be relied on by the head teacher for them to pay the teachers and for them to determine the number of teachers that they will need? Because if you're paying for the teachers, then you would know that, okay, I don't need this amount of teachers to be in my school. I don't know whether my question clear enough. Hello.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you. I'll respond later. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll take 2 or 3 questions and then I'll respond.
Okay, Koffi. Do you have any more questions? Let me check.
Yeah,
Well,
I see Sefam Adoboy.
She just asked a question. So, Madam Sefan, if you can please lower your hand. There's also a question from Mr. Vincent Agada, and it says that what is the cause of teacher misplacement in our African countries? What is the cause of teacher misplacement in our African countries? So that's also second question for you. So far, I think those are the questions that we have. So if we can answer that, whilst others gather.
Okay, thank you very much. This is a very relevant question, interesting question. What's the cost of teachers misplacement all around African countries? I don't have a clear answer, but I'll say that, as I said earlier, 1/3 of teachers are not at the right place. So we can say that 1/3 of the teachers' wage bill is wasted, if I can see, and you can clearly evaluate or estimate what really the 1/3 of teachers' wage bill. That is clear because we do have figures about teachers' wage bill in many countries. We can run these estimates, and if you want to have a clear figure in terms of dollars or of local currency, that is something we can work on in a separate conversation, and then I'll be happy to do that and to show this to you. The first colleague asked about, what can be done in order to improve this discrepancy between central government being in charge of the recruitment and then the local staff or principal who is in charge of identifying the needs. What usually we tell countries is to improve the decentralization of education system. That means we need to find a system where district authorities or local authorities are in charge of the recruitment of teachers. In doing so, we are pretty sure to make sure we can make sure that those who are taking the recruitment decision and those who are employing the teachers, especially the principal, they are close to each other. And this control can be more effective than having this control from the central government. Because all over the Africa, government are making efforts to improve the situation, but it's not really improving because they are far away from the very place where the needs are identified. So the overall advice we can tell to government is to improve or to move forward in decentralizing their education system so that the local authority, they have means, they have power, they have capacity to recruit and to manage and to use the teachers in schools. So this is tentative response, but if you need more information, we can have a conversation over this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Well, we have another question which says that with regards to teachers teaching less than half of their workload, how can this be checked in your estimation? With regards to teachers teaching less than half of their workload, how can this be checked?
But that's very simple as a statistician or planners or managers. If you go to a school about how many classes they have and how many teachers they have, if you compare the classes with the students' weekly loads on one hand, and you compare the number of staff and the weekly teachers at the other hand, and you compare the two figures, that you really identify if teachers, they are really making their weekly load or not. This is very common when you ask the Department of Statistics within the ministry, when they share the database with you, you have those figures, you can check after hands if the teachers are really meeting their teaching loads on the ground. I don't know whether in Ghana you have those kind of information, but this is very common in many other countries, and we were able to have this kind of information, for example, in Sierra Leone or in Mauritania or in Namibia. So that this is something you can also do in Ghana.
Okay, great. I'm sure we have some head teachers on the platform, as well as teacher planners and educators. So the floor is open for comments and contributions on the Ghanaian perspective. So anyone who has information on that can please share to enrich our discussion. Hello, participants. Waiting for your comments, inputs. Madam Sefan, do you still have your hand up?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please make your contribution or comment.
Okay, so what I have noticed, but I'm a teacher in one of the government schools.
Okay.
Before the COVID, we were teaching in line with, so based on the subject you teach, whether it's a core subject or an elective, then you probably be doing maybe 20 hours or plus in a week. And if it's a core subject, then you'll be doing, based on the number of classes, then you'll be doing maybe 16 or something in a week. However, what is the challenge now is the size of the class to a teacher. Because when Doc was presenting, you realize that some parts, for example, Silurion, some schools were getting 20 something, others were getting 30, and others were getting 50. In our cases, in some of the public schools, maybe a population of 3,000, you'll be getting maybe 80 or 70 plus in a school, in a class, to a teacher. And if that happens, the workload of the teacher is affected in terms of quality of delivery, how to get to mark their exercises, how to give them feedback in real time, and other things becomes a daunting task. So we can also look at how best we can reduce the class size, because he indicated that there's no specific rule when it comes to class size from country to country. But then when we have to talk about quality of delivery in terms of the teacher's work, then we have to look at the class size very carefully so that the teacher can deliver and give feedback in real time for the student to also perform well. Otherwise, it is a merry-go-round. Needs of students are not being met, and the teacher too cannot know how best to help the students in the class.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very relevant comment, and I very welcome. Yeah, the truth is, yeah, the challenges countries are facing are multiple. And when it comes to teacher management, they are facing with class size who are not really uniform or exactly the same. I'm talking about the physical class size, the physical classroom. In many countries, you have classrooms that are not really adequate to put kids or students in. In poor neighborhood, for example, or remote area, you have classrooms that are not really on the standard of the country. That means there are classrooms that are not, I'm talking about the physical one. So in you cannot put 50 or 60 students. That's the reason why sometimes you have teachers, but you cannot fit enough students. At the same time, you have, for example, in urban area where you observe class size around 80 or 80 something. So in such situations, countries are facing with different challenges. We understand the situation and we expect the situation to be improved when country will be building more classrooms in standard, in the normal standard, if I can say. In countries like Niger, you have about 40 to 50% of classrooms who are not really, the physical classroom, I mean, who are not really at standard size. So in this situation, you cannot put a normal class of students in those classrooms. That's the reason how they have multiple small size classrooms, because the class size are not really in line with the national standard. So countries are facing with those challenges depending on the situation. But there is something government can do. For example, in Guinea-Bissau, in urban area, they can have something we call double shifts classrooms. That means
Hello.
come in the afternoon. So that means you have, rather than having one teacher for 100 people, 100 students, you have two teachers with 50 students each time. This is something we advise government to do so that they can improve the teacher management issue. And at the same time, where there is a lack of classroom, we tell countries to do something we call double vacation. That means, you know, one teacher come in the morning with what I can say, a multiple classroom. That means one teacher has two classes within the same classroom. That means they have grade 2 with small sizes, they combine them together and they have those in the same classroom. This is something government should be doing. All over the schools. So we have many other policy guidelines in this regard. And if someone want more information, I'll be happy to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Koffi. Well, I think in line with that, Dr. Nyame makes a comment that I think the needs assessment process in schools should be in line with the recruitment process to balance the allocation of teachers to the different regions of our countries. So there's a need for need assessment to be done in line with the recruitment processes to balance the allocation of teachers to the different regions of our country. It's interesting, Koffi also mentioned the double track system at the primary school. I remember some time back, we had that in our public schools in Ghana, and that was happening in that time. Don't know if it's still happening now, but we've also had situations where we've had double track system at the primary school to ensure that the pupil-teacher ratio is not so large. But if there's a question that has come in, says in looking at the teacher-pupil ratio in the sampled countries you talked about, did you actually consider the specialized course or subject areas of the teachers within a school that necessarily resulted in the variations in the ratios in a country? I will take that again. In looking at the teacher-pupil ratio in the sample countries, did you consider the specialized course or subject areas of the teachers within a school that necessarily resulted in the variations in the ratio in that country? Then there's also another question, so let me add that one so you answer both, Koffi. Teacher deployments must be linked to the diverse characteristics of pupils and students. In this slide, should Ghana continue to operate the class teaching model in primary schools? I'll take that again. Teacher deployments must be linked to the diverse characteristics of pupils and students. In this slide, should Ghana continue to operate the class teaching models in primary schools? So those are the two questions for you.
Yeah.
If you can.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting questions. Yeah. The first one is about, you know, the specialized course subjects area, especially at secondary level. As I told earlier, we have situation where, you know, there is lack of math teachers or science teachers or literature teachers. That is correct. That is true. And when doing this, we analyze, this, and this is well taken into account in our reports and in our websites. If you Google IIEP Dakar and you scroll, you'll see, depending on the country, you'll have specific reports, and in those reports you'll see analysis that are run depending on subjects, and especially at junior and senior secondary level. So the response is yes. The course and subject are taken into account when it comes to analyzing teacher management at secondary level. The other question is the characteristics of students that require that Ghana continue thinks a little bit about how the class teaching model should be continued or not. Yeah, that's an interesting question. But what I would say is, for now, in African countries, the class teaching model is, I can say, the most effective way for government when it comes to spending. I know that there are other models of teaching that the government can adopt, but the idea for us as planners and managers is whether those models are the most effective when it comes to learning outcomes, when it comes to spending. So I can say we need to look at the value for money for those before advising the government to move from class teaching model. This is a field or a food for thought for us as planners and managers, and this is something we can really work on the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and talking about that, I think it will be an interesting research area for IEPA and IIEP to collaborate and see if it's working or not, and advise our governments in that direction. Yeah. Well, I think that's all the questions and comments we have. I mean, it's a few minutes to round up. And you're receiving a lot of congratulatory message saying that thank you for that excellent presentation. So, Mr. Koffi, there are a lot of congratulatory message that has come in for you. Thanks for the excellent presentation. Okay. And there's a question. How do we ensure equitable and fair deployment of teachers devoid of situations where some people reject postings to specific locations? So how do we ensure equitable and fair deployment of teachers devoid of situations where some people reject postings to specific location? And that's from Dr.
That's an interesting question as well. I'm happy to have this conversation with you. And when it comes to policy, especially in the policy of teacher deployment to hard to reach areas or to remote areas, those areas that are not really attractive to teachers, government should put some incentives to encourage teachers to be deployed into those areas. And indeed, many countries in Africa put incentives that means measure to encourage teachers. And about those incentives, we have incentive on salary. That means there's a top up on salary for teachers to go there. But this kind of incentive, we as planners, we do not really encourage government to do it because of the poor management of incentives. Most of the time, what we observe in many countries is once the teacher get the incentive because he was affected to a remote area, when he changed the position, the location, he was affected to another location, he keep having this incentive because of the poor management of the system. So what we advise most of the time government to do is we encourage them to have, like, a housing for teachers, or to have many incentives in terms of the nature of the work on the ground. If there is housing, for example, all teachers in remote areas, the teacher knows that when he goes there, he will not be paying rent anymore. So there will be a rent for a house for him, so that that is an incentive for him to go there. And he can have also, for example, means for his transportation, or he can have other incentives that are not the salary incentive. So that is something government can do, and government can be very effective. And we encourage them to do whatever they can so that teachers are encouraged to go to the hard-to-reach areas or remote areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just as I was going to say, we are about wrapping up. That's a question for you, Koffi. Excellent presentation. What parameters will make allocation deprived? That's from
deprived of teachers.
Well, that's what the question says. So
yeah, the remoteness.
Yes, yeah.
The remoteness or the security, the safety issue. We see that now in many countries where teachers, they don't want to go to a specific location because there is a security, there is a safety issue in this area. For this, unfortunately, we as Ministry of Education, we as planners, we cannot really do something about it, but government as a whole, they can secure the area, and they can make sure that safety is in there for teachers to go there. But when it comes to remoteness or hard to reach areas, I talked earlier about incentives that government can do. So those are the parameters I can talk about.
Thank you. So security, safety issues, remoteness, even though it falls outside the purview of educational planners, we can also employ government to ensure that these things are catered for, so that teachers will accept their deployment to remote areas when it happens.
Are you still with us?
Yes. Hello, can you hear me?
Now, yes.
We can hear you now.
Okay, thank you. So there's a question.
There's another question I can see here.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Another question. How may we promote a sub-regional teacher deployment policy to foster deployment of teachers across borders? That's from one country to another country in West Africa, especially between Anglophone and Francophone countries. How may we a sub-regional teacher deployment policy to foster deployment of teachers across borders? That's from one country to another country in West Africa, especially between Anglophone and Francophone countries.
This is an interesting question as well. But for me now, by experience, I cannot recall having this kind of experience, but this is something definitely I know that back in 80s or 90s, we have some teachers from like Togo or Benin that are deployed in Cote d'Ivoire or vice versa. And this is something we can promote. We as policymakers, as advisors to government, that's something we can do. a few years ago, I experienced this kind of things between Kenya and South Sudan, where the government of Kenya provided teachers to government of South Sudan, and that there was a contract between the two governments, and yes, and also I read in Sierra Leone there is an agreement between Sierra Leone, or at that time there was discussion about an agreement between Sierra Leone and Senegal, so that Sierra Leone can benefit from French teachers from Senegal. So this is definitely, we can think about when supporting governments designing their new policy or their new reform. That will benefit to between many countries in the region. Yeah, thank you for raising that issue.
Thank you very much. So I think that's all time will bring us to, and thank you so much, Koffi, for that wonderful presentation and for that fluent English speaking. I know as a French speaking person, you've done fantastic on the English language. Not a lot of English speaking people can speak French that fluently. So thumbs up for that. Thank you very much on that.
I'm trying to improve it,
Yeah, well, this is more than improvement. I mean, that was fantastic. That was fantastic. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I think I'm going to be very serious and learn my French very well, so I can also speak French that fluent in the coming days. So thank you all for your time and for joining this webinar series. This is the last one for the year because December is Christmas and we want to give all of us a break for Christmas. So this is our last webinar series for the year. We will start the series again in January 2022. So on this note, I say season greetings and Merry Christmas to all of us, because I wouldn't have time to say that in December. And also for all of those asking whether you're going to get the slides, yes, we're going to email the slides to your emails, the very emails you used to register for the webinar. We will send the slides using those emails to you. And if you need a certificate for this webinar, know that IEPA can give you a certificate. Just kindly send us an email to ocpr@ucc.edu.gh, which I've shared in the chat, and we will take it up from there to get you a certificate on that. So on that note, I say thank you all for making time to join us, and let's have a good afternoon and season's greetings. And thank you very much, Koffi, and all our friends from IIEP who made time to join for this webinar. We appreciate you. Thank you and have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day and season greeting to you all.
Thank you, IEP.
Thank you. I'm most grateful.
Yeah, that's one. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.